Let me tell you something that has been on my mind lately. Something I think a lot of folks don't realize about electric cars. You know how everyone's talking about EVs, how they're the future, how we're all going to be plugging in instead of filling up? Well, there's a catch that isn't making the headlines, and it has everything to do with China. Seriously, if you follow the trail of what goes into an electric car, you end up smack dab in the middle of China's supply chain. Picture this. Every EV, whether it's a fancy new Tesla or a Chevy Bolt, needs a battery. And those batteries just fall from the sky. They rebuilt from a bunch of stuff we dig out of the earth. Lithium, for starters. They call it white gold because it's so valuable for batteries. Now you might think, hey, we've got lithium mines in Australia and South America, right? And you'd be right. But here's the kicker. Most of that raw lithium gets shipped off to China, because that's where almost all the processing happens. It's like we're growing the wheat, but China's the only bakery in town, and lithium's just the beginning. Take cobalt, for example. Most of it comes from the Congo, but guess who owns or controls a huge chunk of those mines? Yep, Chinese companies. They've set up shop there, and then they ship the cobalt back home to be refined. So even if the metal starts out in Africa, it's China that turns it into something you can actually use in a battery. Then there's graphite. You probably don't think about graphite much, maybe you remember it from pencil leads in school, but it's a big deal for EV batteries. China pretty much owns the whole market. They mine it, they process it, they ship it out. If you're driving an EV in America, odds are the graphite in your battery took a trip through China. And it doesn't stop there. There are these things called rare earth elements. They sound fancy, but basically they're metals that make electric motors work better. China's got a lock on those too. They've been investing in this stuff for decades, so even if other countries have the raw materials, it's China that knows how to turn them into the high-tech parts we need. Now let's talk about what happens after all those materials are processed. China's not just shipping out the raw stuff, they're making the actual battery parts too. The cathodes, the anodes, the electrolytes, all those pieces that make a battery tick. Chinese factories are cranking these out at a scale that's hard to imagine. It's like if Ford and GM were the only two car companies in the world, and everyone else had to buy their engines from them. And then you get to the batteries themselves. Companies like CATL and BYD, they're basically the battery giants. Their factories are enormous. In just 1 month, they can make enough batteries to power 1 million cars. That's more than some countries do in an entire year. So when you hear about a new EV hitting the market, chances are the battery inside either came from China or was built using Chinese parts. Here's where it gets a little scary. Every step of this process, mining, refining, making battery parts, assembling the batteries, China's involved. And if anything gets disrupted, whether it's a political spat or just a problem at one of those big factories, it's like pulling a card from the bottom of a house of cards. Everything could come tumbling down. That's not just me being dramatic. It's the reality of how interconnected this whole thing is. You might be wondering, what are we doing about it? Well, Europe slapped some big tariffs on Chinese EVs trying to protect their own car companies. Over here, folks in DC are worried about national security, about Chinese tech in our cars, about data and software. But the real issue is deeper. We just don't have the factories, the know-how, or the supply chains to make these batteries without China. Even industry insiders admit it. Getting out from under China's shadow would take years and a ton of money. And it's not just about car companies. Think about all the people working in auto plants here in the States. Their jobs depend on these batteries showing up on time. If something goes wrong halfway around the world, it could mean layoffs or even plant closures. Plus, there's the environmental side. Everyone wants cleaner cars. But if we're relying on mining and factories in places with different standards, it gets complicated. So, what's the plan? There are some big ideas out there. Government funding for new mines, tax breaks for battery factories, research into new types of batteries that don't need as much cobalt or graphite. But building a new mine here in the US? That can take a decade or more with all the permits and local pushback. And even then, You've got to build the refineries and factories, train the workers, and get everything running smoothly. Meanwhile, China's not standing still. They're already working on the next generation of battery tech. That leaves American automakers in a tough spot. They're setting big goals for EVs, promising more models every year. But behind the scenes, they're hedging their bets, stockpiling batteries, signing long-term contracts, even looking into alternative battery chemistries. But the truth is, for now, there's no real substitute for what China provides. So next time you see a shiny new electric car on the road, remember, its journey probably started in a mine in Australia or Africa, made a pit stop in a Chinese factory, and only then ended up in an American dealership. The whole system is balanced on this delicate web, and while it's working for now, it wouldn't take much to throw it off. It's kind of wild, isn't it? We're racing toward an electric future, but the road runs straight through China. And until we figure out how to build more of this stuff at home, that's just the way it is. Something to think about next time you plug in.